what we will do, we'll carry on our session, and I'll use this mobile for the presentation. And I'll try that for a subject as dry as tax, in the next 10 to 15 minutes, I give you a synopsis of the overall tax structure in Pakistan, as well as some elements which are technology specific. So when I was told that I was supposed to give a session on a keynote speech on technology taxation, I thought it would be a 40, 50 minutes discussion. But I was told it was around 15 minutes discussion. So what I've done is that I've just touched the tip of the iceberg. And the idea is that just to give you guys and ladies a feeler about the taxation framework in Pakistan with specific reference to technology. So first of all, what I'll try to do is just give you an idea about the overall tax framework in Pakistan. So essentially, the taxation, the legal framework in Pakistan can be divided into two parts. One is the federal side of taxes, and the other one is the provincial side of taxes. As far as the federal side of taxes is concerned, income tax in Pakistan and corporation and the corporate taxation in Pakistan is managed through the federal. So basically, when you know the federal budget is coming, so of course that federal budget comes from the federal side. And after those days, after 3-4 days, a provincial budget comes along. So the provincial budget looks at certain things which are in relation to sale tax, and sale tax is in countries outside Pakistan, it is also known as VAT, value added tax. So in Pakistan, we call it tax. We call it sale tax. So when it comes to taxation on the federal level, income tax and direct tax. So there are 4 types of regime. One regime is normal tax regime. So in normal tax regime, what happens is that you are taxed on the profits which you make during a particular year. So for that, in Pakistan, the taxation rate which is prevailing nowadays is 29%. But there is another exemption that if your size is small as a company, so the rate comes down to 20%. So the rate for small companies is 20%. Then in a country like Pakistan, there is a concept of minimum tax. Whenever you make a payment to another party, being a company or a sole proprietor, depending upon your nature of business, you deduct certain taxes. And that tax accounts for your overall liability. You call it a minimum tax. And then there is a final tax regime. So what happens if, for example, if you make certain exports and you get the money back to Pakistan, the bank deducts certain tax on that. So that is the final tax at times. So basically, you don't have to pay any extra tax, and that is considered to be the final tax liability. And to top it off, there are at times separate block of income. So separate block of incomes which are not covered neither in the normal regime, not in the minimum tax regime, or the final tax regime. So there are cases like investment in sukuks and tax on certain other areas are covered in the separate block income. Now, when it comes to taxation framework on provincial side, so as I've mentioned, it is called indirect taxes, sale tax on services, or tax on the VAT mode. So what happens is that when it comes to sale tax on goods, it is the federal subject, and it is deducted by the federal government. And sale tax on services is collected by the provincial government, and the rate of taxes is mostly between 13 to 16%. However, for IT services, the rate is lower, and it fluctuates between 2 to 5% depending upon which which province you are working. One very important aspect that needs to be considered, consider the role of withholding taxes. So what happens is that in Pakistan, unfortunately, government is not able to collect proper taxes. So what it does is it uses the withholding tax regime to collect taxes. So it is evident that more than 50% of tax collection in Pakistan, the dependency is through the withholding tax regime. So what happens is that what the government does, that whenever you are making a payment to a third party, it asks you to deduct the tax on their behalf. So what it does, it makes the taxation system overly complex. So in Pakistan, the problem is that the compliances, and for a small business, for a small IT business, which has got a revenue of 3 lakhs, 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, it has to, and if they register themselves as a company, they have to withhold payments whenever they are making payments. So basically, what it does, for small companies, it creates unnecessary hurdles. So what we've done is whenever we are communicating with FBR on policy matters, we just tell them that they have to bring in a regime whereby this withholding taxes for small companies can be managed in a more efficient way. So for the purpose of this presentation, what we've done is that we have classified the technology ecosystem into 4 parts. Technology companies providing services in Pakistan only, technology companies exporting services from Pakistan, startups, and freelancers. So when it comes to companies which are providing services in Pakistan only, they fall into the normal tax regime. So what happens is, as I've mentioned, that if they fall in the category of small companies, overall profits will be taxed at the rate of 20%. And if they don't fall into that category, they would be taxed at 29%. But the provincial governments realize that they cannot impose sale tax of 15, 16, 17%. So what they've done is that in Islamabad, there is a reduced rate for sale tax, which is 5%. In Sindh, it is 3%. And KPK, it is 2%. And however, the law says that you cannot claim input tax adjustment, because in the VAT mode, you can claim the input adjustment if the higher rate is applied. But in case of IT, in case of technology and IT, you cannot claim such exemptions. Now, the main thing is, and I believe this is one area that the technology companies which are exporting services from Pakistan, I believe this is one of the most pertinent sections, because most of the technology companies which are working in Pakistan are exporting their services. So over here, the government has given a lot of exemptions. So what they say is that if you are exporting your IT services, and if you are complying with certain legal regulations, you will be applied a 0.25 rate on the whole of the export proceeds that come into Pakistan. And if, for example, for that, you have to be registered with the PSEB, and you need to comply with certain other regulatory stuff. So tax is deducted, which is deducted is final tax. And what you have to do is you have to, income tax and sale tax returns and withholding statements, you have to file to just claim such exemptions. So as far as the export of IT services is concerned, it is exempt as far as the provincial sale tax laws. However, it is very pertinent to note that even if your IT services are exempt, you need to file the provincial tax returns. For all of those people who are working as freelancers or are running startup companies, the key is, whether we like it or not, the compliances you'll have to make to claim all these exemptions. So as far as the startups are concerned, basically there's a separate definition of startup in the ordinance. And so if any company is offering technology-driven products and services, so they could be classified as startups. You have to register with the PSEB, and your turnover has to be less than 100 million. And there are other provisions like for the first 3 years, they would allow you to your profits won't be taxable. So, but you have to, there are certain conditionalities in terms of filing of tax, which you need to comply. So basically what tax authorities are doing, what they want to document the economy. So they would be willing to give you the exemptions, but only on the conditions that if you make the proper filing. So that is the crux of the matter. And let me tell you one thing. In Pakistan, if you are running a technology company and you are exporting your services, the tax regime is pretty decent. And if you just consult a tax advisor and you do things the right way, you don't have to pay much of taxes. You pay 0.25, 1%, and as far as your compliances are concerned, if they're complete, not much tax has to be paid. So in Pakistan, the tax regime for technology is very tax friendly. So then it comes to freelancers. So freelancer is kind of a gray area, and I believe that the panel discussion which we'll be having afterwards, we'll be discussing that, because I believe you are aware that in Pakistan is the 4th largest country in the world as far as freelancers are concerned. Yeah. So I'll be needing 5 minutes because of all the disruption. Yeah. So in Pakistan is the 4th largest economy in the world as far as the freelancers is concerned. So, and I've seen that a lot of freelancers they face problems when it comes to taxation. Now, as per the law, what we understand is that if they comply with the filing requirement and the compliance requirements, they would be all those things, all the exemptions which are available to startups is also available to the freelancers. So we'll be discussing this element in more detail when we enter into the panel discussion. So then there is a very, very important aspect that needs to be covered, and that is STZA. Ikra was here, and she just touched based on this particular aspect. So under the STZA law, if the buildings which come under the purview of STZA, there are a lot of exemptions. So you should be cognizant of the fact that if you want to run a business, you need to ask the question, is it registered with the STZA? Because if it is, there is a 10-year exemption for developers and enterprises which are operating within STZA. And even for the VCs, there's capital gain and dividend exemption for that. So this is very substantial. So let me tell you, I'll be very clear. If I am here and I have to come up with a technology company, I would always go and start my business in an STZ environment, because that is something which would give me a lot of leeway to work with. And then there is sale tax exemption for the enterprise on import and raw material of plant and equipment, and there is no custom duty. So STZ exemption is very important for local as well as foreign investment. So I believe it is something that needs to be kept in mind whenever someone is starting a technology business. So this is my last slide, so I'll just take 2-3 minutes more. Well, my experience of the last 6-7 years has been that new technology businesses, startups, freelancers, they make certain mistakes when it comes to starting their technology business. The first main mistake is that they don't do the tax planning at the start. So my advice is that don't be penny wise, pound foolish. Go to a tax consultant, ask them. It's not a rocket science that, okay, I'm willing to start a technology business. I'll be exporting the services, or my strategic objective is this or that. So this one aspect, I've seen people lose a lot of money because they haven't done tax planning at the very start. So that is one thing, that the proper consultation with the tax department before you start the business is mandatory. And one problem, then of course, a part of the tax consulting is that, okay, you need, whether a company should be made or an AOP should be made, because the tax compliances on AOP and company is different. And then there are certain tax elements as far as dividend is concerned and other stuff is concerned, which the panel will be discussing in detail, is different. So whenever you are coming up with a technology business, you have to be very clear that what kind of business structure you use. And one thing is very important, and I believe for the startup ecosystem as well as the technology business is concerned, they should understand one thing, that if you need to run the business in an efficient way in the long run, tax compliances are necessary. Government is giving exemptions, they are giving you tax holidays, but at एक शर्त के ऊपर देंगी, that if you are tax compliant. So just mentally make the note of one thing, that as you grow, you have to be tax compliant because there is no other way around. And tax compliances are not that difficult. And I believe there are lots of tax advisors who can guide things, and even the finance people who are a bit senior, they know all of the tax implications. So one thing needs to be kept in mind, that don't try to hide कि यार हमने compliances नहीं करनी और किसी तरीके से हम compliances किए बगैर जो है we can just get away with taxes. So that is my advice to the technology companies.